Hi everyone, this is audap. Hey, let's take a look at Gyruss, which was originally released in the arcades in 1983, and we'll take a look at a couple different versions of Gyruss, starting with the original arcade version. Gosh, I remember playing this when I was tiny. In fact, I think I actually had to have like a little booster seat just to be able to reach the controllers and play the game. At least that's what I remember. Oh, hold on. I gotta change the volume. Okay. Now, this is basically just like a glorified version of Galaga with some really awesome music and kind of a different perspective with enemies surrounding you in this sort of, this tube-like playfield. Yeah, even in these early days, Konami was making some good music. And this was one of the games that was actually set kind of loud because the music was so distinctive. So you would hear this game in the arcade, assuming that the arcade operator didn't turn off the attract mode. Oh boy, doing well already. There's that sound effect that we heard from Moon Patrol when we were playing that earlier. Yeah, strange thing that this is a vertical game oriented, so they tilted the screen 90 degrees. I'm not really sure why that needed to happen. Now, in the arcade, this game is endless, and in fact, all the other versions, except for the NES version, didn't have an ending. You just keep playing until you died, which, there were no continues during when this game was made. So, you could only play for as long as you could on your one credit with 3 lives and, potentially earning another life. And again, I think a modern audience would maybe not understand the appeal of the game, but it was quite an attractive system when it came out. Pretty attractive arcade system. It had good artwork on the side, and again, it was usually tuned to be pretty loud, so you could hear it. Yeah, and no scaling blitter, so these are just hand-drawn sprites kind of scaled in and out of the screen. Kind of makes sense for the time period. Those 3D sprite blitters were not really all that common. That's why something like Afterburner and Space Harrier, they were such they were such attractive games, because, really, up until then, if you wanted sprites scaled and have a sort of a 3D effect, that was all hand-drawn, and you could always see the frames in between them, whereas you know, Afterburner and Space Harrier, you know, they had that special chip in there. Okay, so that was the original, and I apologize, I didn't do too well there. So let's look at some of the console releases. I think the first one out of the gate was the 5200 version, followed by the ColecoVision or Commodore 64 version. And we'll just see how close these games are to the original. Again, not unreasonable. Doesn't sound too bad. Wow, looks like the default difficulty is a little harder. They shoot at you right off the gate. Oh, and they get a lot closer to you, too. Pattern's a little different. Seems like they sort of skipped the first pattern. I want to say this came out like 2 years later. Like, if the original game was 82, this came out like 84. And again, you know, the 5200 was unfortunately a system that didn't quite make it. It was sort of shoddy construction, and you know, felt rushed to market. Especially the joysticks. You know, joysticks are notorious for being pretty terrible, and for good reason. You know. Because they were terrible. All plastic, you know, easily worn out. Although, you know, featured full analog control and no digital at all, even though almost every game in the era was made for digital control. Again, for me, in 1984, this would have been perfectly fine. You know, obviously the arcade version looks and sounds better, but this is pretty close. All things considered for the technology of the era, you know. Got quite a bit of slowdown there. Yeah, and on the Mystery you can make some adjustments to the clock speed of the CPU, but we're just gonna play it how it was originally stock. Again, obviously it takes a hit in the graphics, but it still gives you pretty much the same experience. just zoomed in a little closer too, you know. If I remember right, there's a bug in this game where certain stages won't let you progress until you kill yourself. Like they get stuck in the ending loop, and you know, it doesn't realize that that you've killed all the enemies. Kind of a cruel bug, huh? Oh, Mickey Mouse got away from me. Yeah, I actually do want to cover the 5200 a little bit more. Again, you know, I like kind of oddball systems, and it was definitely an oddball system. You know, it didn't even manage to survive the you know, the 2600. 2600 stayed much more active, and the 5200, you know, faded away pretty quickly. Again, for good reasons. It wasn't for bad reasons. You know, the shoddy construction. You had 2 different generations of systems too, which had different compatibility issues. Which I think is why they went for backwards compatibility for the 7800, but they you know, they left out the 5200 mainly because the cartridges, you know, physically had a different slot, and it didn't make sense to try to be backwards compatible to a system that wasn't popular. Okay, so let's hit another system. We'll hit the Commodore 64, or well, basically the Commodore 64, the ColecoVision. Really wasn't far off from that system. We don't have to deal with the drastic loading times of the Commodore 64. That's why I'm not playing that version. Ooh, boy, that's a quieter experience, that's for sure. But you know, it does look a little cleaner, right? I mean, the 5200 and the ColecoVision were, you know, competing for the same dollar, kind of in the same generation. And you know, this one does look better. Although the starfield isn't animated quite as well as the 5200 version, that's kind of interesting. I'd have to say the 5200 sounds better too. But this one runs much quicker. Look at that asteroid. I can barely keep up with it. Oh boy, they all had different patterns. It's interesting. Yeah, significantly smaller sprites, though, than the 5200 version. It's sort of fascinating to see them side by side. Boy, the pitch is a little off in this version. It doesn't know how to count very quickly, either. I'll say that that has you know, the 5200 version. The 5200 version has a leg up as far as that's concerned. Yeah, a little slow too, huh? Oh, okay, alright, I get it. Stay away from the center, apparently. Yeah, your interaction with the far objects isn't as good as with the 5200 version either. Again, kind of surprising to see them. Now that we've taken a look at the arcade version and the 5200 version. Honestly, I kind of prefer that 5200 version. Even though this one plays faster. Doesn't have the same problems with slowdown like that 5200 version does. Oh my god. Boy, it really screws you after a while. Yeah, I guess it just ends like that. That's interesting. Okay, so we took a look at the 5200 version and the ColecoVision version. So the next major version that came out was for the Famicom, or the NES. We're actually going to take a look at the Famicom Disk version, which was released first. Then later, when it came over to the States, they did release a version on cartridge. They're basically the same, except this version has an extended ending, whereas the NES version, the cartridge version, has a little intro, a little story. Yeah, the cartridge version just has a very, very simple text ending. Yeah, I think this is the version that most of us Gen Xers are going to be more familiar with. At least the younger Gen Xers. Obviously, the older ones, like me, would be more familiar with the arcade version. Obviously, quite a bit different on the music as well. And, many, many improvements. Completely different patterns. I guess we can debate whether or not it sounds better than the original game. But it's certainly, more complex. It definitely sounds like all of the, now we got new enemies too. Definitely sounds like all of the, very NES, Konami NES sound to it. Almost Castlevania-ish, Yeah, and the sprites are much bigger. Got a nice star field. Overall, actually a better version than the arcade version. Of course, it came out much later, so, Konami had a long time to think about how they wanted to do their conversion. Make it something that was more console-y and less arcadey, giving it a bit more complexity. We got bosses. Yeah, there was a version of this game, the arcade game, released on the Xbox 360. Part of the Live Arcade. But really, this is kind of the definitive version, the NES version, or really more accurately, the Famicom Disk version. It is funny to see and hear so much Gradius and Castlevania in this game. And like I said, the arcade version and all the subsequent, the earlier console releases, they just had the one song. But you were only meant to play it for a couple minutes. Whereas this game actually has an ending. There's definitely an end to the game. I think there's some additional power-ups that are not in the in any version besides this. Obviously, there's new enemies too. A little slowdown, like a lot of NES games. Looks like they kept the flicker to a minimum, although you can see the flicker is just kind of worming its way in the background there. Been too greedy. I just wanted to hit it. Boy, a tough one. Kind of hard to tell where it's going to go. This is also one of these games where the turbo controller, if you want to use turbo, actually kind of screws you up a bit because it shoots too fast, and it makes you miss enemies, probably more often than you hit them. Oh my god. Such wonderful luck on my part. Oh, bastard. It's like a troll enemy. All right, so there you go. That was Gyruss in a couple of different forms. You know, I mean, obviously the NES version is the definitive version. So if you're going to play a version of Gyruss, then that's probably the version that you want to check out the most. You know, the pure arcade experience I think is nice, but you know, they made so many improvements to the Gyruss formula with the NES version that you know, it doesn't make sense to play this version unless you have just a particular nostalgia for this specific version. Overall, you know, the 5200 version was actually pretty strong, which is a surprise. And the Coleco version wasn't bad as well, although you know, playing them side by side, you can kind of realize that the Coleco version one was lacking just a little bit. But you know, in that era, I would have been happy with any of those versions. Yeah, definitely a classic take on Galaga or Space Invaders if you want to go back further. Just with all this really great music, or the one really great song, you know, and you know, pretty fast and frenetic gameplay. And I think that's the thing that really makes it survive the test of time. So yeah, hopefully you have some means to play one of those versions of Gyruss. I think the game stands up pretty well today. You know, it's certainly more exciting than playing the original Space Invaders, or even Galaga for the most part. At least the original Galaga. You know, obviously Galaga and Galaxian, you know, they had a bunch of sequels, which really improved upon the formula. But you know, I think this was a good take on Konami's part, and you know, this was in the days when they made games. So I appreciate those days, since it doesn't look like that's a thing that's going to happen anymore. Anyway, yeah, that was Gyruss, and I'm audap. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I will see you at the next stream.